Welcome everyone to lecture 2 of our notes. This time we will examine more closely the statements related to Galilean transformation. First, we consider Galilean transformation and the validity of Newton's law with respect to Galilean transformation. Consider two reference frames to which we have referred in the previous lecture as well, and we'll continue to refer throughout this course, S and S prime, where S prime is moving with respect to S with velocity v along the positive x direction. The coordinate x prime is given by x minus vt, so long as the origins of the two coordinates coincide when you start your clock. If you differentiate that, you get the velocity of any particle in frame S prime with respect to that in frame S as v prime equals v minus the v of the frame, which is the usual velocity addition formula. If you differentiate once more, you get the accelerations of the two frames, which turn out to be equal. Because after all, the relative velocity of the two frames does not depend on time. It's uniform velocity by definition or by our postulate, which essentially means that acceleration of a body is same in both the frames. And so if there is an object with mass m times a is equal to m times a prime. Therefore, the force experienced by an object in S prime is the same as that in S. And force is the essential ingredient of dynamics. So dynamics is the same in both the frames. Of course, it could have been different if they were moving with some acceleration with respect to each other, in which case one would have to bring in the issue of pseudo force and all that, but that is not within the scope of the present discussion. Therefore, we can conclude that Newton's laws are invariant under Galilean transformation. Now, all frames with motion, at most with motion with uniform velocity with respect to each other, thus form a class. And if Newton's law is valid in one of them, it is valid in all such frames. This class of frames is called a class of inertial frames. That one frame out of the class is inertial. You have to find out from experiment whether really some independent way of ascertaining the force is yielding the force as mass times acceleration of an object as measured in that frame. Be it as it may, we have defined inertial frames in this manner where Newton's law is valid. Here I just leave you to think whether the surface of the earth is inertial if you consider it with respect, for example, a frame of reference fixed to free space outside the earth. You know the answer, and you also know that the deviation from inertial character is but small, and the surface of the earth can be taken as approximate inertial frame for most physics calculations. The bottom line being that Galilean transformation correctly reproduces mechanics in all inertial frames. Next, we ask, is the same statement true as far as Maxwellian electrodynamics is concerned? We will go through today's lectures as well as the next lecture to arrive at a conclusion on this in terms of some example, not an exhaustive proof. But even before that, let us begin by taking a quick look at the laws of electrodynamics in the Maxwellian sense, so that nothing we state later is an undefined statement. You have all studied Maxwell's equations, which are written on top of page 9 of your notes. Equation 22 encapsulates these four vector as well as scalar equations. The first of these, divergence of E equals rho over epsilon naught, is well known. You have all studied Griffith's book, so you need not be given an elaborate account of all this. This is a statement of Gauss's law. And if Gauss's law is applied by taking a point charge enclosed by a spherical surface, then considering the field on the surface, you can easily check that this leads to Coulomb's law. So the first law is an affirmation of Coulomb's law. Next, you consider second one, curl E equals minus del B over del T, which is another statement of Faraday's law, as is shown in the first half of page 10, where there was a typo in equation 28. It should be del T of minus B dot del ds, and therefore minus del phi del T, which essentially retains the spirit of what is called Lenz's law. Now, if there is no time-varying magnetic field, curl E is 0, and therefore E is minus gradient of the electrostatic potential. When it is not so, then minus del B del T also contributes, but we'll come to more of that next. After we have considered the third equation, namely divergence of B equal to 0, which allows us to write B as curl A, following the summary that we have written in the previous lecture. Thus, the potential, the vector potential A, comes in connection with the magnetic field. And using that, you can easily see that the electric field now becomes expressed in terms of the electrostatic potential as well as the magnetic vector potential, as seen in equation 31. And this allows us to say that electric field can have two kinds of sources, one of whom is static charges, and the other is a time-varying magnetic field. Two things can be responsible for a field at any point in space which accelerates a static charge. And such a field is by definition an electric field. Next, we come to the fourth and last equation. Curl B is given by what is there in the right-hand side. When the last term is absent, it tells you that curl B is mu naught times the current density, which is another statement of Ampere's law or Biot-Savart's law. But then, since the divergence of a curl is 0, the divergence of the current density is also 0, which essentially means that there is no accumulation of charge everywhere. This is true for a steady current. If it is not a steady current, time-varying current density at any point, you have divergence J equal to minus del rho del T, which is the equation of continuity. And this immediately tells you that since rho is given as divergence of E, things are expressed to give you another term in the equation where you get equation 35. This tells us that magnetic field can have two sources. One is an electric current, the other is a time-varying electric field. This is interesting. A current-carrying conductor placed in a time-varying electric field will also undergo an acceleration, and this is the underlying principle of a generator. Thus, the electric and magnetic fields, as seen in Maxwellian electrodynamics, can have their sources in charges and steady currents in one hand, and rate of change, time varying magnetic field and time varying electric field on the other hand. Here, you must remember something very carefully. Now, time varying electric and magnetic field immediately brings in the idea of the rate of flow of time in a particular frame. And this is a very crucial factor in checking the validity of Maxwell's equation in a particular frame. We will start in the next lecture by assuming naively that the rate of flow of time is same in two inertial frames, and start verifying the validity of Maxwell's equation, at least in one illustrative example. And what follows after that is something that we will see. But before we see that, let me remind you that there is the other important law called the Lorentz force law, which is also part and parcel of Maxwellian electrodynamics, where the force is given on a moving charge as the charge times the electric field at that point, and also the cross product of the velocity and the magnetic field at that point. If the laws of electrodynamics have to be valid in all inertial frames under a transformation, be it Galilean or a modified form of Galilean transformation, then this equation 36, namely the Lorentz force equation, this too must be valid in each such frame. And with this, we end our lecture 2. We will come to the next lecture in due course. Thank you for your attention.